Receive 90 seconds for an introduction. They'll receive 4 questions, each of a minute long in response, and they'll have a 30-second closing. Dr. Zaneb, if I can start with you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Zaneb Beams. I'm running for Board of Education for Howard County. I'm a pediatrician and a parent of 4 children in our school system in elementary and middle schools. And I'm running because as a pediatrician and a parent in our school system, I feel that I have a lot of salient expertise to bring to many of the issues that have recently been in front of the board as well as those upcoming. I am specifically interested in developmentally appropriate learning and wellness policies in our schools. That means everything from how much time our kids spend in physical activity and recess to when the schools open and close. I think it's very important that we look at our start times policies. I'm also increasingly concerned in the repercussions of increased emphasis on scores and testing as pertain to not only our kids but also our educators and administrators. I want all of those folks in our schools to have appropriate focus on learning and less focus on checking boxes, administration, and scores. And finally, I will absolutely be committed to ensuring equity to whatever extent I can across the county at every age and in every school across the county. And I absolutely ask you to support me when you go to the polls on November 4th. I'm Dr. Zaneb Beams, pediatrician running for Board of Education here in Howard County.
Thanks. Good evening. My name is Dan Furman, and I first want to thank the Savage Community Association and PTA for allowing us to be here tonight and for the opportunity to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a K-12 graduate of the Howard County Public School System and graduate specifically from Wild Lake High School. I graduated from UMBC with an undergrad in political science, and I'm a licensed attorney in Maryland who actually practices in education law. I served 2 years as a student member of the Board of Education while in high school, and after I came back from law school, I came home to Howard County to serve 3 years as counsel to the Board of Education and the school system. Currently, I work for the Howard County delegation to the General Assembly as their counsel as they work in Annapolis on our behalf. There's much I want to do if I'm elected, but my main goal is to address the economic disparities that are currently that are occurring between our different schools and different communities within Howard County. I want to make sure that there's an equity of opportunity for every student in the system, no matter what their socioeconomic background may be. The fact is, students in some schools may have a better chance to succeed than others, and the major factor causing this difference is because funding is mainly driven by the amount of students per school instead of the individual needs that our schools actually have. I'm proud to be endorsed by our teachers union, the HCEA, the current Senate Majority Leader Jim Broby, and other former members of the Board of Education. I hope you share in my goals and listen to everything that's said tonight, and I hope you'll honor me with your vote. Thank you very much.
Good evening, I'm Sandra French, and I'm seeking my 5th term on the Board of Education. My husband and I, believe it or not, moved here not for the schools in 1971, but to get away from the noise of the airport because I taught English at Glenburnie High School. And we literally had to stop talking when the airplanes went over because of the noise. We raised our children here. Both boys went K through 12 through the school system. During that time, well, I taught for 8 years. Then I substitute taught in Howard County schools. But I was also a PTA volunteer and became ultimately PTA Council President of Howard County, as well as State Vice President of Legislation. I used those skills to lobby the board, and as a result, the board has had coffee and conversations to meet with parents and to hear their concerns ever since I got on the board. And that we have also incorporated in every new school and in every renovated school a volunteer room for the PTAs to provide space for the volunteers to have their possessions safe. I come from a parent and a teacher background, and I use that when I make decisions on the board. I am a both-and person. I am not either or, either this or that. I try to incorporate into decisions as much as possible that will benefit most or the majority of students at every opportunity. Closing the gaps. Gender gaps was a big thing in the 90s. Now, closing the gaps among lower socioeconomic levels and among racial groups is extremely critical.
Hi, my name is Mike Smith, and I'm a candidate for the Board of Education. I want to talk about two things first. I want to point out that something that has not been discussed much during this campaign, and that is the fact that we have a slate of candidates endorsed by the union leadership, not by the union membership, by the union leadership. And to date, those candidates have not renounced that endorsement, despite the fact that those leaders last spring called for a job action in support of their contract demands, which urged teachers to refuse to write letters of recommendation for kids needing them to get entry into college, refused to meet after school with kids who needed help getting ready for their finals. Then during collective bargaining, that leadership asked for a contract package, and got it, that did two things. It included a step, but instead of a second step, they asked for a cash lump sum payment for the teachers. Why? Because they wanted to be able to falsely represent that they'd gotten a multi-year deal. The significance of asking for a lump sum payment for the teachers was the fact that it did not roll into the teachers' salary for pension purposes or COLA purposes. And yet, these candidates who say they're in favor of, they're advocating for students and teachers, have continued to accept that endorsement. I don't see how they can do that and maintain the positions they've taken on some issues, which, by the way, they have tailored to meet the agenda of the leadership.
Hello, my name is Alan Dyer. I'm not endorsed by the union either. But by golly, I really am glad that the union did endorse some candidates. That's their right, and I applaud them for doing that. It helps us as voters to understand a little bit more about who the candidates are. So I do not quite understand the position that there is anything wrong with the union making endorsements. I don't think there's anything wrong with anyone making endorsements. I think that is reflective of the way I approach my position as an elected official. I've served for 4 years. I'm asking for a second term. And I believe in transparency, and I live transparency. No one in the county has a stronger reputation for being transparent than I do. I've actually been impeached because I've been too transparent. So that is what we need more in this county. We need to know everything that all of our elected officials are doing, and we shouldn't have to ask them what they're doing. They should be telling us and operating in the public eye all the time. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bess Altwerger, and I have lived in Howard County for 26 years. My kids went through the school system. My daughter is right now a teacher at Wild Lake High School, where she went to school. I'm a candidate for this election because I really believe that it's time to have a career-long educator on the Board of Education. I have been a professor of education at Towson University for 26 years. And I know the research on what we can do to create the best learning environment for our kids. I have several goals that I hope to achieve if I'm elected to the board. First, I want to increase community input into all policy decisions that the board makes. I want to see a new dynamic on the board, which makes it more open and inclusive and responsive to the people of Howard County and the educators of Howard County. Another goal I have is to address the growing disparities that we have across the schools and make sure that we have equity in resources, in facilities, and services across the schools. I think we need to reduce, as an educator, I know that we need to reduce class size and school capacity. I feel very strongly about making sure we have a curriculum that is responsive to the kids in our county and that is well-rounded. And I believe that we need some flexibility in the way we implement the standards. Thank you very much.
And I believe, for the sake of time, we'll actually have Bess take the first question.
Oh, can I ask the first question? May I take off the jacket?
Very fun.
As long as only the jacket.
I feel like I'm on a warning tape.
Dr. Altwerger, do you support millions to remake a historically superior school system, Howard County, with the untested and unproven Common Core system?
Thank you so much for asking me that question. As an educator, I have been aware of the initiation of the Common Core. I know where it comes from, and I know one important thing that we all need to recognize. There is no research behind the Common Core state standards. None. They tell us that it's going to make the kids career and college ready. They have no data whatsoever to establish that fact. Early childhood educators are very concerned that the standards are not developmentally appropriate, especially for the younger children. If I'm elected to the board, what I would like to do is put together a task force of educators and parents in our county to review the standards and petition the Maryland State Department of Education to give us flexibility and possibly waivers as necessary so that we make sure that we're teaching what's appropriate to our children and making them really career and college ready and not buying into the propaganda. Thank you.
Well, I think the question is a little bit slanted, but it's a slant that I would, the spin I'd put to it too. I am right in line with Bess Altwerger. I am concerned that what we are doing is we are listening to directions from above, having to do with what we're supposed to be teaching. I don't see that as an American way to go. I do not like for the higher-ups to tell people how to teach the students in public education. I believe that we have teachers that are from the local community, we have administrators that are from the local community, and we have local boards of education. Those are the people that are supposed to be running our schools, not someone from above.
Well, I'm an unabashed supporter of Common Core standards, and some of the comments here reflect a gross misunderstanding, mischaracterization of what those standards are. Those standards, contrary to what Bess says, were developed by educators nationwide at the state level with funding from various organizations, but they were developed by educators. I find it hard to believe that they did it without considering the data and validity of the core standards. Secondly, they do not dictate course content at all. That is left to the teachers and to the local school systems. All they do is say, by 5th grade, a kid in Mississippi must have the same skills and knowledge as a kid in Howard County. A kid in Western and Eastern Howard County must have the same skills and knowledge. It does not dictate how that is done. It is not dictating from the top down. It simply says, by the time a kid gets through a certain grade, he has to have certain skill sets. That's what the Common Core standards are. It does not specify curriculum. It does not specify teaching methods. It leaves to the professionals at the classroom level or the departmental level the choice as to how to get it done.
Just for the candidates' awareness, we do have a timer right in front of me.
I just noticed.
Thank you.
I only have 10 seconds.
You have 60 seconds. It goes quicker now.
Adding on to what Mr. Smith said, because I am also an unabashed supporter of Common Core standards, that means equity. That means no matter where you move in the state of Maryland or to California, that your fifth grader should be learning the same skills differently because of the teacher, differently or through the curriculum. But we hire our own teachers in the summer. They write the curriculum to meet the standards. They choose the textbooks and the reading materials to meet the standards. The one thing that you must remember is that when a board member becomes a board member, you raise your hand and you swear to uphold all laws. You cannot pick and choose which law you don't like. This is state law.
Thank you. I have some reservations about Common Core. What it really is, at its essence, is sort of an integrated approach, trying to teach a lot of concepts, basic concepts, at once. And I think this question really is, it hits home. Ask your children, what do they think about class? Ask yourselves, are you helping your children with their homework, and what do you think about Common Core? Ask your teachers. They'll tell you that they haven't gotten enough professional development, and that's one thing that we absolutely have to do. And Ms. French is right. Board members take an oath, and they have to uphold state law. And this is part of state law right now. Now, I think there do need to be some changes made, and I recognize the fact that Common Core is here. So we have to adapt to that fact, but we need to better our professional development. We need to minimize any negative impact, and we need to make sure, I agree with Dr. Altwerger's idea of creating a task force to better adapt Common Core to Howard County, and we need to make sure that our children aren't being driven away from any particular subject matter because they feel overburdened by the amount of subjects trying to be taught all at once.
So, as a pediatrician, I'm fully aware of the importance of standards. I've taken as many tests as a human being could take, getting ready to take another one in about 11 months, already preparing for it. Absolutely believe in standards, absolutely believe in the importance of testing our ability and our knowledge. What I don't like, you mentioned, is spending millions, maybe hundreds of millions, with experimental programs on our young people and our educators and our administrators. Common Core is law. It's a set of standards that are important. I want all of our children in every corner of this county, in every state in our nation, to be taught equally. What I don't want is for a set of changes to be forced onto our educators and our children too quickly, and to spend huge amounts of money that we may or may not have, or that we may have better ways to spend, without involving families, without knowing what we're doing and experimenting on our children. I've said for decades, my children are not a science experiment. My children are our future, and we need to believe in them, and we need to commit to them, and be sane and rational in the way that we educate them.
Thank you. The next question touches on a point several of you hit on with respect to proven methodologies and scientific methods. So following that up, how does science inform the policy decisions that you provide to the Board of Education? I'll start with the person right next to me.
Part of the reason I think that I would be an important voice on this Board of Education is that everything I do literally is informed by science. I often joke with people in my office that science is like a religion to me. And I happen to have a professional organization that spends thousands of hours and large amounts of resources coming up with policies based on scientific research and hard data and information about child development, child wellness, and what's best for our children, to make recommendations about everything from learning habits and patterns to nutrition to physical activity to school start times and everything in between. So I would say that I would be an absolutely salient voice using scientific information to inform my recommendations. Just this past week at my Academy's national conference, there was a very broad-based policy statement put out in terms of early literacy, how to talk and read to young children in order to help them read. So absolutely, I think I would be a very important voice on this topic.
Thanks. Science is critical in developing policy. It's critical in developing different Board of Education policy, different directives, our curriculum. We take a look, Board of Education members take a look at reports with massive amounts of data that are disaggregated by numerous different factors. That being said, of course it's important to take that into consideration and make sure that we're using that when we're making smart decisions about where to spend our money and what to spend our money on. However, I want to say that I want to balance all of that science. I want to balance all of that math with the very human component of the child. The fact is, a child, I feel, today is becoming so much of just this compilation of statistics and numbers, and I'm afraid that that's going to become sort of just this meaningless garble of data that's somehow not going to become very human to a governing body. We need to make sure that all of our 51,000 students are actual human beings and that they're approached that way.
Thank you, Tor. Ms. Grant.
The best way to get away from the data is to visit a school. And there you see the beautiful faces of our children, your children. And then you see all the wonderful STEM activities that they're involved in. And you see the excitement on the teachers' faces when they see how engaged their students are in their lesson plans. I can't think of anything better. And then that translates into data at the boardroom. But if a board member only comes to board meetings and never visits the schools during the school day, never gets around, then they will just be numbers and data. And we have clusters. Who's your cluster board member? How often is he or she visiting in this area or visiting your schools? That's important for you to know.
Yeah, I think that science has to inform decisions. I think, fortunately, the board already does have a pediatrician on it as a member. Janet Siddiqui is a board-certified pediatrician affiliated with Johns Hopkins. So to suggest that the board is not already taking into account input from an expert such as Dr. Siddiqui, I think is somewhat overstating the situation. Look, I'm a proud product of liberal arts education. Science is not my passion, it's not my love. But I have to say that I really did enjoy being exposed to science and learning about it and so forth, integrated into an overall curriculum of history and language and music and arts, which I think makes the whole person. I agree with Sandy. I participated in something called a simulated congressional hearing. Fifth graders make issues on presentations on constitutional law issues. I'm an attorney. I learned so much from what these kids were saying, and I watched the teachers getting excited, the kids and so forth, parents getting involved. I think the best hedge against turning kids into data is a cadre of the type of teachers that we now have, loving, caring, committed, nurturing teachers. That will be the bulwark against turning kids.
Thank you. Ms. Dyer.
I like science. I like math a little bit more than I like science. And I like blacksmithing even more than I like math. But I think that if you look at science, the first thing that you have to take from science, and if you're looking at how our children develop, there's a lot of science on that, cognitive science, you have to look at and realize that science tells us that you don't teach these kids nothing but science. They have to be well-rounded, and that's a scientific fact. So what you need is the schools that give you good citizens. If you don't produce a good citizen, if you don't produce a good voter, your school has failed, period. This is America. We need our schools, and we need educated voters. Thank you very much.
I mentioned that I was a professor at Towson for 26 years. My entire career, which started before that, I've been a researcher, a literacy researcher. In fact, I'm on the board of the premier research journal in the field of reading. So I am very concerned about making sure that the decisions that our board makes for our kids is backed up by research. I know the research on class size and how important it is to keep our class sizes down. I know the research on effective teaching, what makes an effective teacher, and how important it is for teachers to know their children well enough to use their professional judgment in how they assess and how they teach their kids. I also know the research on how children learn and how important engagement is and motivation for learning is if we want those kids to develop as well as they can. And finally, I'm going to make a statement that is somewhat controversial, but I think harking back to Dr. Beam, is that testing is not the best way to evaluate children's learning. We're depending way too much on standardized test scores. That's not the data that we should be depending upon to make decisions about our kids.
Thank you, Dr. Thanks. And I'll start the next question down to your end. Big call. Given the Ebola in the news recently, what, in your opinion, is the role of technology in health in Howard County school systems, such as telehealth?
I was just listening to this report on Ebola on the way here. I think that I'm concerned that we don't have certified nurses, RNs, in our schools. I think it's very, it has a lot of potential, the telehealth program. I think about what Dr. Beam has said about that, and she has some concerns. She's a professional in this area. But I do think that we need to make sure that we're taking care of both the physical health and the mental health of children. We need social services in our schools. We need social workers. We need counselors. We need all kinds of support for our children to be healthy, both physically and mentally. And we need to keep the parents involved in any kind of medical consultation that may take place in the schools. That's a concern of mine.
Thank you.
Okay, when it comes to Ebola, I think the most important thing that we can do right now as a school system is to prepare for continuing their education at home. I've already spoken to the superintendent and asked her to look into doing a survey of what access to the internet all of the students have, so that those students that are lacking in access, we can concentrate on those in the event, and this is just a hypothetical, but in the event that Ebola hits our county and we end up doing what all the places that get hit with Ebola, closing the schools. After you close the schools, according to the science, they're doing a little bit of research in this, according to science, the students move from about 15 contacts per day with other individuals to about 12 contacts while they're at home. That's because they're not stuck in front of their monitors and in their rooms studying. We need to keep these kids isolated from other people during Ebola.
Yes, I think the telehealth system is really a great step forward. And it does involve the parents at every critical stage. Decisions cannot be made without input from the parents, so that has been taken into account. With respect to staffing schools with registered nurses and so forth, I think we have to take a look at that. If there's not sufficient volume to fully occupy such an individual, then it makes little sense to devote that resource, that costly resource, to being stationed in a particular school. Maybe you have a certified or a registered nurse assigned to a cluster of schools and so forth, but that could be the next step. Now, in terms of doing something such as Alan suggests, I think that's a significant overreaction. I'm concerned about Ebola, but not to the point where we're supposed to start shutting down schools. I think we have to do what we can to make sure that kids have access to health care, especially those kids who are most vulnerable, who may not be covered by insurance and so forth. This is a significant step forward for some of our students and some of our schools where they predominate.
We have many students who come to school ill because their parents have to work, cannot stay home with their children. We have a wonderful wellness clinic here, the first, started here at Furman Bridge, and I spoke to the principal before this forum began. He said that the school has a 40% free and reduced meal population. Half of the entire student population, the parents have signed up to participate in the wellness clinic. That is a huge success, in his opinion, including the full-time mental health component. This is not coming through the school system finances. This is coming thanks to our wonderful county government health department. But this is a wonderful partnership. Now, the telehealth is at 5 other elementary schools, and it's computerized, needs a parent's permission. The parent is always involved. If a child comes to school ill and goes to the health room, then the parent will be contacted and a health professional, and a diagnosis will be made. This is wonderful. Wash your hands.
It's perfect.
Thank you. As far as Ebola directly, I don't want to feed into the fear that has been purveyed by many of the cable news channels, and Dr. Beams is certainly much more qualified to answer than I am, but my understanding is that it can really only be spread by direct human-to-human contact, and for that reason I'm not going to go too much into the Ebola part of this question. I think the critical part of the question involves student health and what we're doing, and as Ms. French said, there are many students in not just this school, but in the entire county who don't have access to quality health care. Now, we're changing that, and the state legislature and the county government is stepping up to make sure that we're doing a better job. The one thing I can tell you is that we do have a need for fully qualified nurses to be available to our students in these schools. And if you don't believe me, ask your administrator, talk to your nurses that are currently there. These nurses are jumping from one school to another school, and we're using contracted out nurses. They're not even employees of the school system right now. So we're wasting a ton of money on sending out on contracted out nurses and not even having them be a part of our school system. So I think we should certainly look into that.
Sure. So I have a few things to say about this topic. As you can imagine, I'll try to speak really quickly. One, I just want to say, given the importance of this kind of question, this is now the second question we've had about science and health. If one pediatrician on the board is a good thing, aren't 2 pediatricians even better? There's a reason why pediatricians are running for Board of Education. It's because we care about kids and we know we have expertise to share. So I don't think there's any problem with 2 of us being on there. We get along very well. We work together. On the topic of Ebola and enterovirus D68, since that's the other one, there's a lot more enterovirus D68 going around than there is Ebola at this time. So I'm a little more concerned about that one than Ebola. I think the fact is that we need to be prepared as a community, and thankfully we're here in Maryland where we've got a great public health infrastructure, and we need to continue to trust that public health infrastructure and invest in it. The last thing I'll say about telehealth, I practice telehealth in my practice already. I think I could be a very valuable voice on that topic. We certainly have to address privacy concerns, qualifications of practitioners, and a cost-benefit ratio.
The next question is more general, and this will be the final question for the evening for the Board of Education. And that question is, what are the primary problems in the Howard County public school system as you see them, and what fix do you see, or how will you fix that?
The few things I in particular am concerned about in the public education system are physical activity and nutrition, increased emphasis on testing and scores as opposed to lifelong learning and building a bright future for a whole child. As a product of one of the top liberal arts colleges in this country, who did not actually study science before I went to medical school, I'm fully aware of the importance of a breadth of skills and interests in being a well-rounded citizen. And I think it's extremely important. A part of that is making sure we don't turn our children into score-producing automatons so we can publicize our county. It's important that we invest in our children as human beings who are going to be members of our community. That's my second biggest concern. My third biggest concern is making sure that we have biologically and developmentally appropriate times and schedules and structures, as well as learning practices in our school. And so start times would be a big focus for me as well.
Thank you, Dr. Beams.
As I said before, equity of opportunity. That's really where I see the centerpiece of my campaign. It's making sure that a child has the same opportunity to succeed here as they would if they went to elementary school at Clarksville Elementary School, which may be considered a wealthier community in some in the county. For me, this all goes back to the operating budget. I know it's not a particularly fun topic. I know it's not always a particularly interesting topic, but the board's going to be asking for over $780 million, and it's going to be the largest operating budget yet to date. And that is an awful lot of money to spend. And we need to make sure that we are spending that money addressing individual school needs and making sure that we are actually employing our resources in such a way that we are giving students an opportunity to success, that we're switching our staffing funding for our staffing formulas to make sure that our teachers are where they need to be. There's a number of different things that are going to come up in this campaign, and I have a number of different positions, but that's really the one that I would hope that you take home tonight, is providing equity of opportunity for all of our students and adjusting our budget to do that.
First of all, we all would love if you would choose 1 or 2 or 4 of us and take a yard sign or support us, because we're nonpartisan and we need help. Second of all, take our literature from the table and look at it later. See what we have to say. Third, I really want to stress the fact that equity has been the mantra of every Board of Education for decades. And we have a lot of things to be proud of. 12 years ago, kindergarten, only 66% of the students who entered kindergarten were fully ready. Now 89% are fully ready when they enter kindergarten. We need to get it to 100%. It's always about improving, continuous progress, and the differential staffing. I'm sorry, Mr. Furman is absolutely wrong. This board has always looked at staffing first based on enrollment and then based on need. And I have the list for last year of every single school and the additional staffing that they received. For example, Bowman Bridge received staffing for 668 enrollment and then received an additional 9.6 positions based upon need. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to hit a few isolated points in response to some of the things that the candidates have said. First of all, 83%, according to a recent poll, 83% of teachers nationwide approve of and are enthusiastic about Common Core standards. 83%. Secondly, we keep hearing this thing about testing. I've heard Dr. Beams make this statement over and over again. Going forward, we will be testing fewer than 15 hours a year starting in 3rd grade. One of those tests, called PART, is mandated by state law as part of the Common Core standards. The other test is called MAP, and what it is a device whereby teachers can determine how a child is progressing through the school year. It is not a high-stakes test. So that's the truth on testing. Now, I think the most significant issue we're facing our county and our nation as a whole is this glaring achievement gap. And it is absolutely important that we bring innovative, independent solutions to this problem. Because if we don't get it right now, we're creating another generation of kids who will be unemployable, disengaged, and they'll become not part of the political system, but part of the correction system. We've got to get it right now. We have the wherewithal to do it, and that will be my number one priority. I will focus on it like a laser beam.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And I would remind you, Board of Education candidates, that you have 30 seconds for closing comments to follow up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't know that.
Initially, Mr. Furman is right, Mrs. French is wrong, very wrong. I've served on the board for 4 years with Mrs. French, and I assure you that they did not take any effort to make sure that the best teachers were where they were most needed. This board has failed you there, and that board majority needs to be overturned. You have 4 positions up in November for you to vote on. That's a majority of the board. Please get some new people on the board and let Mrs. French go out to pasture where she certainly belongs. She's earned that. Finally, the most important job that I see to be on the board facing me is something I cannot deal with by myself as a board member or as a board, and that is the integration of our communities. If we don't have integrated communities, we don't have integrated schools. We'll never have that. It's critical for the Board of Education to work hand in hand with the county council with enlightened land use. And until that's done, and it hasn't been done, well, Mrs. French has been on the board all 5, 6, 7 terms. I don't know. I lose track. 4. So it's critical to get a board majority that will work with the county council. Thank you.
I moved to Columbia from New Mexico. I researched it. I moved here because I wanted my kids to grow up in an integrated community. What I've seen happen in Columbia, sadly, is a growing almost segregation, economic segregation, and it worries me because it's showing up in the schools. We have some schools that have over 50% of children from low-income homes, and other schools that have 0.05. So that is a number one concern for me, and we need to work with the county council on how to deal with this issue, but I do have some ideas about how the schools could deal with some of these issues, having special programs in every school and so forth. The other thing that I'm concerned about is that teachers right now I teach teachers. I hear from them all the time. They are completely overwhelmed and feel that their professional judgment is being sucked away from them. They don't have the flexibility to address the differences in learning rates and learning styles of our kids. And one correction is that the latest report says that we're down to 40% of teachers nationwide who support Common Core, now that they have to actually use it, and they see the consequences.
Cindy, if I could have, so Cynthia Vaillancourt has joined us. I know she had prior engagement. If you could take 90 seconds and introduce yourself to the audience, and do that as your intro.
Hi, I'm really sorry that I had an actual Board of Education assignment that I had to go do, and I thought it would be really rude not to do the job because I was out campaigning to try to keep the job. But I'm on the board. I have been just completing my 4th year, and I would like to go back for another 4 years, only another 4 years. I have a couple of projects that I've been working on that I'm getting closer on that I'd like to really see come to fruition, one being changing the start times. I get the sense that there might have been some contentious conversation here earlier, so whatever you heard about start times, they need to be later. It's not healthy to start the academic school day for high schoolers at 17. And I would like to do a couple of other things with the school days that we're getting close on. I don't really want to throw stones, especially since I haven't heard all of it, but I'm reminded of a saying, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. And the 84% thing is, if that is a statistic anywhere, it must have been an interestingly worded question. I mean, I don't have a problem with the notion of Common Core, the idea that there is a standard, this is what a first grader should learn, this is what a second grader should learn, this is what a third grader should learn. I think that's a good idea. You know, that there should be some kind of a framework that we shoot for. What we have right now that people, teachers, professionals, people who know what they're talking about and what they're doing are concerned about is that we have a half-baked plan being rushed into the classrooms, and our students who are the guinea pigs right now, you know, we might be thinking of it as beta testing, but these kids who are second, third graders, this is their only year, hopefully, to be second or third graders. So while we're playing around, their lives are ticking away. I'm sorry.
That's great. Yep. Time is right on time. She was new to this piece, as we all. So we're going to now go into the 30-second closing comment opportunity. I think that'll follow up the introduction piece nicely, but I was hoping to have you go last on that piece anyway, so this works out well. Dr. Beams, if you could open, close.
So I was halfway through my college studies as a history major when I realized that I wanted to make real change every day in people's lives. And I became a pediatrician. I dedicated my life to helping kids because I thought it was the best way to build a brighter future for all of us. I want you to remember that our board works for you. We are fortunate here in Howard County to have a fully elected board, and that means that we are answerable to you, our voters, and that's exactly what I will be when I am on the Board of Education. All day long, I take care of children, and I watch them growing, and I love it. And that's why I want to be on this Board of Education. They are our community's future, they're your future, they're my future. I'm completely dedicated and devoted to our children, and that's why I want to be on the Board of Education. Please remember, November 4th, vote for Dr. Zaneb Beams for Board of Education.
Thank you. I have 30 seconds, so I won't waste it with divisiveness other than to say that part of my experience comes from 3 years as a professional within the Senior Central Office. I stand for a comprehensive magnet program where we're teaching children real things that they can actually apply to later in life. It's a program that our county has never had. We have never had a comprehensive magnet program. I stand for competitive and well-compensated teacher contracts because we need teachers that we're going to invest in so that they will invest in Howard County. I stand for equity of opportunity for all children, no matter where they live, and I want to make sure that our high school start times are moved up later because study after study shows that children that age group, high school or later, need to start their day a little bit later. And I want to make sure that we put an internet-enabled device in every child's home in this county because that's the future and that's where we need to go. And if Baltimore County can do it, we can do it too. Thank you very much, Dan Furman, and I hope I have your support.
Federal law states that all Title I schools must have highly qualified teachers based upon their definition. And if a child has a teacher who does not meet that high standard, a letter must be sent with that teacher's name to the parent. We don't send those letters because we have highly qualified teachers in our neediest schools now. It's been a mission of the school system for a long time. The thing is, our decisions have to be based on what is best for the student. All of us have ideas, but we have to work with the superintendent and the staff. We have to make sure that our staff is well qualified, has the appropriate professional development so that they can provide an excellent, nurturing education to the students.
Well, I can't disagree with anything that's been said in terms of the closings. I think there are differences of opinion in terms of how we proceed. I think there's a difference of opinion in terms of degree of independence candidates can exercise if they were elected. But I do think that the one thing we have to be focusing on are the kids, and in particular the kids in schools who need additional help. Again, we don't get that problem addressed and do it properly. And I think Common Core standards are one way to do it. Qualified teachers are another way of doing it. Providing the kids with support that they need in the schools is another way to do it. Helping parents who may not know how to help their kids succeed because they didn't succeed at school can be an important component. But that has to be our focus right now. It will be a trickle-up effect if we do that because of the betterment of all of our students for our entire community, and that should be our focus.
Our focus as voters should be the fact that you have a board majority up for election. And this is your chance to make sure that you finally have a board that will listen to you, a board that will respond when you go to the public forum with a question or a comment, and the board can talk back to you because the majority chair says we're going to have an open board. This is your chance to get the Board of Education that you deserve. Please do not forget that opportunity because the current board majority hasn't done what they were supposed to do for decades. Give another board majority a chance to give you the transparency and the responsiveness that you deserve.
I said I came here from New Mexico, but obviously I'm from New York. If you haven't been able to tell, I'm a product of the New York City public school system. I have been an ardent supporter of public schools, an advocate for public schools my entire life. I founded an organization called Save Our Schools. It's a national organization that fights for equity, parent involvement, community involvement in education. I want to bring my passion for public education to our county at the local level, rather than at just the national level. And this is my opportunity to do that if you give me that chance. I feel strongly that we need to keep attracting and retaining the finest educators in our state to our county. And that means we need to treat them with respect. We need to make sure that they get contracts that keep them here, and that they are happy working with your children every day. And lastly, I want to reiterate the idea that we want a board that's not just going to listen, but actually respond and involve the community in the decisions that they make. And I am devoted to that ideal. Thank you.
Again, I've had it about up to here with ugly the last couple of weeks. So I'm not going to participate in the ugly fest that seems to have been going on. I'm familiar with the comments because I've heard them before. I would say, though, that anybody who is trying to say that the people who've been endorsed by the teachers union will somehow not be independent or responsive or will have some kind of a built-in bias. Anybody who wants to bash our teachers, I don't think is probably a great person who should be on the Board of Education. The teachers are, as we always say, the backbone of the school system. We say that. We haven't been acting like it a lot lately. And when it comes to the conversation about how much time is going to be spent on testing, this is a shell game that the administration and the school system, senior administration, is playing with the parents and the people, and you all. We are doing a lot more testing. It is significantly more than 15 hours. You can redefine it, you can call it something different, and then pretend that you're not doing it. Grab a third grader and ask them what they did in school today. The other things that I wanted to work on is providing actual VOTEC. I'm sorry, did you? Actual VOTEC. We have been failing our students.
Thank you to all of our Board of Education candidates.